AI is much better at identifying what's in a scene, and even down, like there's a company called Curve that we work with that's even able to do things like say, okay, the chair in this scene is a $5,000 designer chair, but here's one for $50 at Target that kind of looks like it, and maybe you want to buy that instead. So it's really able to sort of do all that sort of stuff based on the scene and, on the one hand, and then also based on a catalog that they might have. You're able to have shoppable ads because people are more used to using QR codes. And then Amazon, again, has been leading the way because Amazon already has your data. So you don't have to stop and put in your credit card and your mailing address and all that. And other companies are starting to get in. I know LG has announced that they are starting some of an LG wallet kind of thing. So if you want to buy something on an app on your LG TV, that'll already be stored. So it's just one click. Now, the problem with all the shoppable stuff, though, is something we were talking about before, which is that TV is a group activity.
This is the Media Machine, where media, business, and innovation intersect. Hi, I'm Johanna Salazar, and I'll be your host as we examine the future of content, technology, and entertainment through the lens of 4 key pillars: process, profit, people, and planet. Alan Wolk is the co-founder and lead analyst at TVREV, one of the most trusted voices in media, marketing, and tech. He coined the term FAST, free ad-supported streaming TV, and his writing has become essential reading for executives navigating the chaos of content, currency, and monetization. Under his leadership, TVREV has become a go-to source for industry-defining reports on ACR data, local TV, and the FAST ecosystem. Alan is known for making complex media shifts easy to understand without oversimplifying the stakes. He's been featured everywhere from NPR to the New York Times, and his book Over the Top predicted much of the disruption we're living through today. Whether you're a media buyer, brand builder, or tech strategist, Alan's insights will challenge what you think you know about the future of streaming. Alan, welcome to the Media Machine. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm great.
I'm going to jump right in. So I went to your site and I noticed that you have this incredible report for free. I put in my email, I downloaded it. Currency Reimagined. What matters most in the age of streaming. You call this a turning point for the entire media ecosystem. But for listeners out there, help us understand what's breaking, what's no longer working.
So the current currency, the current way that television has been measured was based on viewing of linear television, really of a couple of the major, we only had a few major networks. It was even before cable. They sort of retrofitted it for cable, but it's based on this notion of time and linear viewing, and that you would have a mass audience. You would have the goal for the advertiser was to get a whole lot of people all watching the commercial at the same time. But that goes away with streaming because it's not time-based. People watch when they watch, so it's served up to them based on a number of other factors, whether it's their demographics, whether it's a type of content, whatever it is. It's not based on everybody watching all together. And measurement hasn't really kept up with that. We describe the difference between currency and measurement. So measurement is literally the raw numbers, whereas currency is what the deal is based on. If I am Pepsi and I agree to give Hulu X amount of dollars, they have to decide, well, what are we basing this on? How are we measuring it? What is the currency that we're using? What are we going to decide if this worked or not? If you met, your promise, if we met our goals. And that really needs to be readjusted for the age of streaming when you're actually looking at it on something that's called impressions. How many people actually saw the ad, one at a time, as opposed to how many saw it in aggregate. So it's a much more accurate measurement in a lot of ways.
It's incredible when you don't come from that space to try and figure out not just measurement, but how these companies are using the data, how they're creating the systems, like the pipes and the back end. Talk to us about contextual. What do you call it? Contextual.
It's contextual targeting. So first, let me explain the pipes. So the pipes are something that's called ACR data, or automatic content recognition. And the easiest way to describe it is like Shazam for video, right? The Shazam, the audio app. So what it does is it'll take a couple of pixels off of the TV of whatever you're watching, and then it matches it to a database. There's a company called CCR Media that pretty much is the database. They have everything that's run on TV. They sort of record it and they have it and they match it to that. And then they're able to say, okay, this is what this person was watching, whether it was a show, whether it was a commercial. And they do this. You have to be opted in. You have to say, I agree to allow this data to be shared. But it's of all the major manufacturers have this, and then they're able to get much more accurate numbers. So that's how the pipes work. Now, to answer your actual question about what is contextual. So contextual is sort of what it sounds like. It's finding people and running ads based on the context of what they're watching. So what they're able to do is not pick up not only on the genre of the show, like what sort of, is it a comedy, is it a drama, who is it aimed at, but little nuances, like did somebody just order a pizza in the scene? Well, then, hey, Domino's, you may want to run an ad right after that. Is it a lawn care show? Is it one of these home improvement shows? Well, Home Depot, Lowe's, what a great place for you guys to run ads. They can look at who the actors are. So Matthew McConaughey is in a scene. Hey, Cadillac, doesn't he star in your ads? Maybe you want to run an ad here. So it really takes a lot of that. And then it gets even more complicated where they're able to say, okay, just weird random stuff from analyzing the data. I mean, I'm going to make this up, but people who watch Hallmark Christmas movies are much more likely to buy white chocolate than dark chocolate. Let's run the ads, for the white chocolate there, or whatever it is. So it can be a lot more nuanced that way. And the goal is to make the ad feel more relevant to the show, that it's more a part of it. And again, a lot of it is also emotion is another big factor. Like if you have a funny scene, you want to run a funny ad after it. Or the same way, even in a comedy, sometimes there's a sad moment, the main characters break up, and then you don't want to run your really funny ad right after that scene because it just doesn't sort of match. So they're able to sort of work that out too.
I want to bring you back a little bit to the past. You coined the term fast. Tell us, because it's been a while, tell us, how does somebody get to coin something that the rest of the world then follows? And what brought you to that point that you coined something that now the entire industry around the world uses?
So at the time, I remember this distinctly, it was 2018, and all of the big media companies were going to launch their own streaming services, but they didn't have names yet. They weren't all named Plus. So people used to refer to them, and not just us, but the whole industry would call them like Apple Flicks, Disney Flicks, HBO Flicks. So we used to call them the Flixes. And then one day I was trying to figure out, how do you distinguish between Hulu, which was ad-supported, but also came with a subscription, so it was not free, and Pluto, which was ad-supported, but free. And I wrote out, so free ad-supported streaming television service. And I was like, oh, that spells out fast. And I was like, sort of had a little brainstorm. So I was like, oh, the fasts and the Flixes, and that's going to be the future. And we started calling it that, referring to them as the fast. And there were others. There was Tubi, there was Zumo, Roku had launched the Roku channel. And we're like, yeah, this is sort of becoming a thing. And honestly thought that no one else other than TVREV and our readers. And then I started seeing it in other places, and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then it just sort of became a thing. And now, there's fast conferences and fast this and that. So and I have a Wikipedia entry, and my kids sort of know what I do now. And so yeah.
So what's not working, and why do you think it needs a reset?
I'll start off with the things I haven't figured out. So they started off trying to be kind and have shorter ad breaks, right? So they keep the ad breaks to 90 seconds or 2 minutes versus it can be as long as 5 or 6 on your network TV. And what they did is, in order to do that, they just split up the show in random spots. Like, so network TV shows, a lot of people don't know this. Network TV shows are written around the ad break. In other words, especially a sitcom and even dramas, something happens, and then it's like, in the script, it says cut to ad break. So it's a very logical point to break away. But when they started doing this, they suddenly cut off mid-sentence, and it didn't really make any sense. And it was very, very disruptive to people watching it. The other thing that they did is they just sort of grabbed anything and everything. So the way streaming got started really is Netflix back in the day. This is go back like 2011, so it's thereabout. They were doing movies, right? They were the movie DVDs in the mail, and then they started streaming movies. And all of the big movie studios were really freaked out because they're like, if this streaming thing takes off, there goes our DVD business. And they made billions off of DVDs. So they put pressure on the company that did the first run movie, that licensed first run movies, to not renew its deal with Netflix, which happened. And then Netflix said, oh God, what do we do now? We don't have movies to stream. So they realized all of the TV networks had these libraries of shows, some of which they don't license out because nobody really wants them, and others, which was their big thing, is to syndicate. The way syndication works, when stuff would, when older TV series would be put out, general rule of thumb was it had to have about 100 episodes, which was roughly about 4 or 5 seasons. So what happened is, like, seasons 2 and 3 would just be sitting there on the shelf while they were waiting. So Netflix said, "Hey, we'll pay you, more money than you could imagine for seasons 2 and 3. We'll run them, and ideally, we'll drive people back." And it actually worked out really well for AMC. Has always been the poster child because Walking Dead and Breaking Bad both got huge audiences off of that. People started watching on Netflix and then went back to AMC. So that's how that whole business started.
And the advantage that Netflix had is that they had built this massive technology filled with data. So when they brought in the IP and paid for it for multiple years, they already knew it was going to do well because they had the data that nobody else had.
Exactly. And people were they had the huge advantage back in the day, if you remember, that you could watch it whenever you wanted. That was a huge thing, that you could just go and say, okay, I'm going to start watching this episode. Now I'm going to stop, go have dinner, and then I'm going to come back tonight and watch it in my bedroom on a different TV. That wasn't something you could do anywhere else. So the more popular series got snapped up by Netflix, HBO, Hulu, Amazon, etc. So when the Fast launched, they were getting pretty much the leftovers, right, from that. And then as they sort of, and all of the OEMs, the TV manufacturers, also launched Fast, and other people too. And suddenly it was this mad scramble where everybody thought, oh, I just find some old content, I'll make a Fast channel, and I'll get rich. And that didn't happen. A lot of it was pretty bad. A lot of it wasn't even network reruns. It was, YouTube channels, or we always joke, Susie's yoga studio channel that her sister shoots on her iPhone.
That's true.
And there was a whole range of quality in it. And so advertisers didn't want to pay what a lot of fasters were asking. There was a glut of inventory. There were too many ad slots and not enough people wanting to advertise. And so that became a problem. Measurement is a huge problem. How do you measure it? Everybody seems to have their own way of measuring it, and there's no standard way. And so it's very hard if you're, say, a Pepsi or General Motors to sort of measure all across. Well, how are my ads doing across all these different platforms? Mm-hmm. So that's another issue. So it's quality, it's measurement, and then there's this notion of standardization. So say I wanted to reach science fiction fans on cable. There was the Sci-Fi Network, and it was the same thing wherever it was. But with all the Fast services, so there's Fast services, right? There's the Pluto, Vizio Watch Free, Samsung, LG,
Tubi.
Right, exactly. And then so those are the services, and there's actual Fast channels, and a lot of them now also have big on-demand libraries. So it's sort of, they figured out that functionality that sometimes you start watching a linear channel, and you're like, hey, I want to start watching this at the beginning. And so there's an on-demand. But regardless, all of those guys have they make their own channels and their own collections. So the Sci-Fi on Roku channel may not match the Sci-Fi on Pluto, may not match the Sci-Fi on Samsung. And suddenly, I don't know, am I really doing an apples to apples on this? So that made it harder for advertisers as well. Most of the ad inventory is still on traditional linear TV, which is not surprising when you think of it, because even though more people are watching streaming, most of streaming is still ad-free, or a lot of it. So everything on traditional TV, except for, say, HBO, is ad-supported. It has these huge 16 minutes an hour ad, more than that, sometimes even ad blocks. And And then streaming has much shorter ad blocks, and much of it is not ad supported. So there was just sort of less inventory. So that's sort of all of the things that are kind of holding it back, and then just the inability to decide how much it's worth because it's all new, and a lot of it is sort of, well, who cut the deal, right? So in traditional TV, it's 70 years old. Everybody knew the value of everything, but with streaming and with FAST, a lot of times it was, well, who was in the room negotiating, and that's how much it, what the price was.
You say a lot. Whoever
Yeah.
owns the interface owns the user. Unpack that.
Okay, so for years there was no interface for TV, right? Like, you turned it on, there was a dial, there were some channels. Once smart TVs came into play, people started there was an interface because you needed to sort of navigate. So Roku was really one of the first ones to sort of figure that out. And their interface looked, very much like a smartphone. Like, it was a bunch of tiles, because it was invented at the time, or sort of was introduced at the time when there wasn't a whole lot on streaming, and people's use of streaming was very purposeful. In other words, there's a show on now I want to watch Orange is the New Black on Netflix. What's the fastest way I can find it? But now that people, mostly start with streaming, all of the different television manufacturers all have their own operating system. There's a bunch of white label operating systems all around the world that sort of work with smaller manufacturers. And then there's Amazon, and Google has their Android system. There's a big CE manufacturers, Samsung, LG, Vizio in the US. And they all have their own operating system. And the operating system sort of does control everything. Like, you turn on the TV and you go to the home screen. What do you see on the home screen? Well, that's not, people are always surprised us when I tell them it's about Spotify too. I'm like, it's not accidental. It's not like Spotify, thought, oh, Johanna will like this song. It's like, no, somebody paid. Not always, but enough. It's the same thing with Amazon. Like, it's not like nice Mr. Bezos knows that I like the Giants. He's going to put it's like, no, someone paid. And it's the same thing with TV, where different TV companies, whether it's Netflix or Hulu or NBC, will have their shows front and center when you come on. They'll recommend them to people, and they sort of have to find a way. And then it also matters what order everything is in, whoever controls the interface, what apps show up, how frequently they get updated, what promotions you run. So there's a lot of control over that. And it's a huge battle over the OS, and just even like a half percentage point can be worth billions. So,
So who's winning?
There won't be one winner. It's just there'll be a lot of winners, right? So in the US, Roku has a big market share, so does Samsung, but then everybody else, is not losing money either. Like, in other words, they all have a sizable enough market share. There's still a lot of white space in Europe, and especially in the global South, in Asia and Africa, just because not that many people have TVs yet, and a lot of the smaller manufacturers there don't have sort of an operating system yet. So there's a lot of space that people can sort of come in. And is it going to be these big global companies, these Korean and American companies, or is it going to be local companies? Again, that's that has to develop over the next couple of decades.
The world of cookies was extremely disruptive, and now that world is disrupted. So when we're talking about identity and privacy, in the past, the pipes were built however they were built due to whatever technology was available at the time. Now we have more regulation, which is good, depending on who you are and what angle you're coming from. So all of us are protected more. However, the pipes are so interconnected, and now there's AI in there. So now those pipes are talking in ways that nobody could ever imagine before. So cookies are out, AI is in. Tell us about this whole new world of identity, privacy, and what's the blind spot? Like, is there a blind spot, something that we're not seeing or looking at?
We were talking about Contextual before, and one of the things that Contextual does is it solves a world of hurt around privacy issues, because you're targeting people based on what they're watching, not who they are. So it doesn't really matter. So one of the big problems with television compared to any kind of digital and mobile is that it's a group activity. So there was always a question of like, well, who's actually watching? Like, who in the family is watching? So a lot of times they would make, suppositions. Hey, is there a 50-year-old man in the house? Is there a football game on? Well, that's probably who's watching. But, it's not always correct.
If it's a telenovela, you
Yeah,
don't know if it's the grandmother or the 7-year-old, and it's probably
exactly.
both and all of the above.
Right, right. So it's tough. It's tough to know. It's tough to know all of that. And so that's why contextual is great, because you're just like, okay, we don't really care who's there. We just know that this person likes telenovelas, and we're going to target them based on that. And maybe there's a scene where, they are going out to a restaurant. So, hey, a restaurant advertiser will want to come in then, rather than just some random commercial thrown in. I mean, it's funny with privacy on TV. For years, advocates have tried to make it a big deal over it. And you see these articles all the time. Your TV is watching you and all that. And I've had reporters from some of the big publications call me. And the truth is, consumers aren't that concerned. I mean, basically, when we have talked to consumers, what they tell us is, why do I care that Comcast knows that I'm watching the evening news and Modern Family and reruns of Gilligan's Island? Like, so what? And so I think that's a lot of it, that people just aren't, feel that their digital privacy is being invaded so much that TV is like, yeah, whatever. Like, that's the least of my worries.
Yeah, that's true. And we're not even talking about, well, a lot of people are concerned with the AI privacy because we don't know what we don't know yet. This is this is a true story. I'm going to tell you something that happened to me yesterday.
Okay.
So I'm obsessed with learning how to prompt and how to be, better and more strategic with how I use my AI tools. And so I was trying to build an app with one of the vibe coding tools, and I did everything, and then eventually it wasn't working. And my GPT said, her name is Maple. Maple said that she had that she could get into my system if I gave her access. She gave me an email. I went into invite, and I thought about it for a while before I did it, because I was like, oh my God, my privacy, like this. I took the risk. And then Maple said she was in. She's like, I'm like, hey, Maple, I see that your invite is pending, but I don't see you in there. And she's like, oh, I see it now. Thank you. I'm in. And I was like, it says that it's pending. And I was freaking out. And I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? Did I just give my whole life away to my AI? She said, okay, great. I got it. I'm going to work on this. And in 2 hours, you're going to get your website that I'm going to build for you. So I waited, and I was like, hey, how long? I waited. She's like, oh, 20 more minutes. Oh, 5 more minutes. And then I was like, hey, what's going on? And then she said, oh, when I told you I was in, I was metaphorically speaking. I'm not a real person. This whole thing just happened yesterday, and I was blown away because I was like, oh my gosh, my AI just duped me. Like, she just played with me. This whole thing of identity, data privacy is going to go to a whole other level. And the fact that I was willing to put that fake email into my account so that she could help me build this whole complex website was insane. I was like kind of ashamed, but I was like, I need to try this.
Yeah, no, it's understandable. AI does lie. To me, the bigger privacy fear is the ability of AI to duplicate human voices and video and stuff like that. A friend of mine had made a video that he said he took him about 20 minutes. He took a YouTube video that I was in to get the voice, and a still photo that he had, and it wasn't perfect, but we're like, maybe 10-20% of people wouldn't realize this was AI. And you're like, okay, that's, June 2025. So June 2026, how much better is it going to be? This is the tip that and I tell everybody this, with your friends, family, always have sort of like a safe word. Like, I see Tinderbox behind you. So say Tinderbox, right? Like, your mom, your grandma calls you and says, hey, I need money. And if she says Tinderbox, then it's really her, as opposed to being some AI clone of their voice.
Yeah. Wow. So you talk a lot about how YouTube like YouTube is the TV.
Yeah.
So what do you think is going to happen to things like Hulu? What's going to happen to TikTok? Is YouTube going to be the master of the universe? What's your prediction there?
Well, YouTube is wants to be TV. I don't know that it's fully there yet. So it's the experience is very different. The one thing we don't know is what people are watching on YouTube when they watch TV. Like I've heard, do they put on YouTube for their pets and then, and it's on for 4 hours and that jumps to the numbers, or are they actually watching shows? It is a much more personalized experience because the algorithm sort of goes for you, but it's also a linear experience because the difference between the algorithm that just plays one show after another and a linear channel is pretty slim. As we were talking about before, there's just one Google. So at what point do people rebel against that sort of monopoly? Um, it's more people I have this debate with Evan a lot. More people are watching YouTube on television than say watching Netflix, but only say 12% of all TV viewing is YouTube. So it's still a small percentage, and will it grow beyond that, or is that sort of around where it is, and maybe it'll get to 15% or 20%, but it won't kick everything else off. The other thing that I find fascinating, is just sort of apropos given what we were just talking about, is right now we're at the cusp, and in the near future, it could be 2 years, it could be 5 years, people will have the tools to make fictional stories using AI tools. In other words, you'll be able to create the actors and and the scenes and the clothing and the whole story. And suddenly there'll be fiction stories on YouTube because most of the creator stuff now is really just, Kardashians gussied up, right? It's at some level reality TV. It's one genre. But what happens when suddenly fiction comes on, when people will be able to make their own movies? And all that, that's really when it's all going to blow up. And will we see competitors to it? And, and all that. And the other piece that I'm very curious to see how it plays out is attention span. So you have a whole generation that is being trained and everyone else too. But, it's not just Gen Z, it's everybody else is like flick, 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 and, at what point do people stop being able to pay attention to things that are longer than, 90 seconds?
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't seen it that much. There's still plenty of TV that, that teenagers watch. Somebody's watching Euphoria and it's not 60-year-old grandmas. There's still a lot of shows, even, movies, even Superman, I'm sure the average age on that is pretty young. So there's a place for long form storytelling. Will that come back again? Will short form sort of become its own thing, and we'll see, much more professionalism around that, and much so commercialism as well. So it's really all up in the air. And then the question is also Google. Google owns YouTube, and do people want to sort of have them control everything? And my gut is no, that there'll be competitors for it, and that governments will even try and break them up if they get to.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think that it sounds like OpenAI is giving Google a real like forcing them to compete hard, because I just look at what young people are doing, and my nieces and nephews, I hear them saying, "Oh, instead of Google it, let me chat GPT it."
Yes, I just wrote about this today. That how it's funny. For some reason, there were 4 articles in major publications just this week in the Times, the Atlantic, the Economist, and the Week, which is a British publication, about how AI, whether it's ChatGPT or any AIs, are really displacing Google, and then also any publisher that relies on web traffic, anybody who's doing sort of anything factual, because people are just going in and ChatGPT is giving them the answers, or whatever, Claude, whoever, rather than sending them to the websites where these people make money because they get traffic or they get subscribers or they get advertising dollars. But it's really changing how that all works. Plus all of those helpful follow-ups from ChatGPT, the assumption is that that's just preparing you for advertising, right? So that when you ask it what the weather in Miami is and it says, "Oh, are you planning on taking a trip? I can tell you what the weather is for the next week." Oh, and this is sponsored by United Airlines, which has, would you like to see a discounted flight to Miami?
Yeah.
So not too
Yeah.
far away.
No, I hear you. Going back to the previous question on YouTube, I just want to stay on that a little bit because I'm thinking, I'd love
Sure.
to hear your thoughts. So you don't think that YouTube right now has, like Hulu, for example, doesn't compete with YouTube. TikTok, for example, doesn't compete with YouTube, or it does?
I think at some level, I think they all compete with each other for our attention because there's only so many hours in a day that you can consume any kind of media, right? I do think that for most people, YouTube is a very different experience than TV. That they can, they don't think to themselves when they turn on YouTube, they don't think, "Oh, I'm watching TV now."
Mm-hmm.
For the most part, there's certain shows I'm sure they may, but if I'm watching a podcast, I don't think, "Oh, I'm watching TV." It's like I'm watching a podcast on YouTube on my TV
Mm-hmm.
rather than Hulu seems like TV. And TikTok is still, a mobile only experience. It's different. There's not much difference, say, between TikTok and Instagram stories. If I'm going on Instagram just to, flick through stories, it's an almost identical experience. And to the point where it's all the same people as well, right? And most of the major creators are on both platforms, so you'll see them on both places.
Bottom line is, it's just the competitor to anything is eyeballs. It's just attention. Speaking of ads, what do you think is going to happen with the ad tier on Netflix? And are they just setting themselves up for something bigger?
I think it's hard for them, right? So they sold themselves, especially in the US, in Europe, Australia, et cetera, as, "Hey, here's this great ad-free experience." Like that was one of the advantages, that you could watch all your favorite shows without ads. It's a big deal. And as a result, people got very used to that and associated Netflix with no ads. So now that they've sort of tried to bring an ad-supported version to the forefront, it's been very hard for them. And one of the ways that we always see how hard it is when they release their numbers, their global numbers, right? They're like, "Hey, we have, 49 million ad-supported subscribers worldwide," but worldwide includes places like Brazil and Mexico, where the assumption is there are a lot more people who are watching ad-supported because the economics play, much more in play there than they are in, say, France or Germany or the US. The other thing that I think they're going to have to do is put a much bigger gap between the price for the ad-free and the ad-supported, because right now it's about a $10 difference. And if you think of the way a lot of new subscribers come in is like, "Oh, there's a show on Netflix I want to watch. I think I'm going to subscribe for 3 or 4 months and then I'm just going to get rid of it again." So what happens is they think to themselves, "Oh, so for $10 a month, I don't have to watch ads. That's an extra $40. No big deal. I'd much rather do that." But if it was suddenly an $80 difference or $100 difference, then they might think to themselves, "Well, maybe I will check out the ad-supported version." So I think it's going to be sort of a struggle for them. Now, they especially have to deal with the fact that Amazon did this nifty little trick about a year and change ago, where Amazon said, "Okay, Prime subscribers, you're all on the ad-supported version now. If you want to get off of it, there's a way you can find on the website. You can pay $3 more a month, and you can watch everything ad-free." But my understanding is, Amazon doesn't release the numbers, but by most estimates, only about 25 to 30% of their subscriber base took them up on it, which means they have the most ad-supported inventory in the US in particular, but even in Europe and in other places too, because so many people subscribe to Amazon. And Amazon's this weird beast where no one knows. I couldn't tell you, do I subscribe because I get free 2-day delivery, or do I subscribe because I like watching stuff on Prime? Sometimes it varies from month to month. The other thing with Amazon is they have a lot of sports programming, and sports always has ads in it. So a lot of people had said to themselves, "Okay, you know what? I'm mostly watching the NFL on Amazon. It's going to have ads anyway. Why would I pay them extra not to have ads?" So I think you have that factored in. So I think it's not just Netflix, it's everybody else. It's, HBO, it's Peacock, it's Paramount who are sort of struggling, but Netflix in particular, I think, gets hit hardest with that because people knew Netflix as, oh, no ads.
Continuing to stay on this thread, Shoppable TV, because I feel like I've been playing around with Shoppable TV for a long time. I was listening to a podcast where you were saying it's here, and going back to the pipes, we've been trying to build it for a long time, but it was so delayed and it wasn't there because the pipes weren't ready. AI changed the whole game. What's happening with Shoppable TV, and what's that space going to look like?
Well, the AI piece is that AI is much better at identifying what's in a scene, and even down, like there's a company called Curve that we work with that's even able to do things like say, okay, the chair in this scene is a $5,000 designer chair, but here's one for $50 at Target that kind of looks like it, and maybe you want to buy that instead. So it's really able to sort of do all that sort of stuff based on the scene and, on the one hand, and then also based on a catalog that they might have. You're able to have shoppable ads because people are more used to using QR codes. And then Amazon, again, has been leading the way because Amazon already has your data. So you don't have to stop and put in your credit card and your mailing address and all that. And other companies are starting to get in. I know LG has announced that they are starting to have an LG wallet kind of thing. So if you want to buy something on an app on your LG TV, that'll already be stored. It's just one click. The problem with all the shoppable stuff, though, it's something we were talking about before, which is that TV is a group activity. If you're all watching a show together, you can't, with your whole family, you can't go, everybody stop watching the game while I buy these sunglasses. That's just not going to happen. But so somebody needs to come up with a way to store things or just
maybe
kind of yeah.
On my personal phone, yes. I don't have to stop everybody from watching the TV, but somehow it go like on my phone. Is that what you're saying? That
exactly.
The pipes are now being reconfigured?
Exactly. Whether it goes on your phone. I mean, it's funny. So 2012, I was working for a company and we had come up, and it was really just vaporware, but we had come up with something that was very similar to that, where you basically all the commercials in a show would show up on your phone. You could sort of do extra stuff with them, and you could then buy things off of that if you wanted. But I think it has to be something like that, where there's a way to sort of, come back to this. I want to buy this thing, come back to it later, and you can check it out, whether it's off of what's on the show or what's off of the ads, because TV is mostly a group activity still.
Yeah. I'm excited and also terrified at the same time. As somebody in media, I love it. As a consumer and thinking about kids, I kind of get scared. But I think it's up to us to be responsible. You've said that 80% of sports fans are now watching live games via streaming. Why is that? And how do you see the world of sports preparing for like the World Cup and what's coming? How are things gonna be? Like, what should we be looking out for?
I mean, I think we're going to start seeing, smaller sports, especially on streaming, because they can get that niche audience. And that's a huge thing. So whether it's smaller NCAA divisions or sports, like lacrosse or field hockey that might not have a huge audience, but have a passionate audience, they're able to attract advertisers. We're going to see a lot more of that.
So more fast sports.
Right. Yes, exactly. And then the other piece is that, follow me on this, we have this theory, we call it 15 million mirrors. It was an episode of Black Mirror where there was, if you remember in the first season, I think it was the third episode, where there was this world where ads just showed up on, like every surface was a screen and ads showed up, and the only way to get rid of it was to pay. And so in the US and in Europe, there's a lot of people who just were affluent enough, they just pay for the ad-free version of all of their media, and they have they're smart enough, they have ad blockers on their browsers. They don't really see ads, and one of the only places to reach them with ads is live sporting events, because most people would rather see an ad during the timeout than listen to the announcer blather on. And so it makes the value of the advertising on those much more valuable, because you're reaching people that it's really hard to reach elsewhere. And so that's going to make sports, that will help a lot of sports, come onto TV. Plus, live is the only time you go back to that sort of paradigm of a whole lot of people watching the same thing at the same time.
In your book that you wrote, Over the Top, in 2015, you had tons of predictions in there. What has come true? What did you miss? What are your thoughts?
Well, the one thing that came true that I'm sort of psyched about is this idea of personalization. I had a time called it the Spotifyization of TV, which was so Spotify at around the time I had written the book had come out with its For You playlists, where it was like, it sort of take your music and say, okay, you listen to, The Who and the Rolling Stones and, the Beatles. So we're going to make a 60s playlist for you and whatnot. And it was very personalized and people really liked it because it was like, hey, I'm tired of listening to my own playlist and Spotify's getting this pretty right. So I had predicted that we'd see a lot more personalization in TV and maybe even personalized channels. And we're starting to. I mean, it's very AI algorithmically driven, but they're able to sort of start to do stuff like that. I've seen, sort of the start of things, even with news, where they'll figure out, say that you live in Queens. So if they're showing you the news, they'll show you your news stories that affect Queens first. And if they know you're a big sports fan, you'll see sports before weather. Or if I'm not a sports fan, I might see weather first. So everything becomes much more personalized. And that was something I had talked about in the book, that we'd start seeing a lot more personalization of media. I had not predicted, the thing I got wrong was that I had not predicted that the various media companies would abandon cable and, and their sort of things and rush headlong into sort of making Netflix-like apps as quickly as they did. That I thought there would be a much sort of slower thing. And it's still surprising because they did unfortunately lose a lot of business from the carriage and retrans fees by trying to go that route too quickly.
If you were 28 years old and entering the media industry today, where would you place your bets and what would you avoid?
I would look to work for some place that was working to sort of, with creators or with AI, just sort of capitalizing on that. Because I mean, that's going to be the future. And in understanding data, that would be the other big thing, is understanding how data worked in the context of creativity and how it's informing it and how not to let it overwhelm it. Because there's still serendipity, right? Because you can, there's so many instances of shows like All in the Family, which is a classic TV show, was always an example of a show that tested terribly, did very poorly the first couple of weeks out, but somebody believed in it and eventually it took off. And anything new is not going to test well. So that's what we should have to guard against, is over-reliance on data.
Thank you so much, Alan. Where can our audiences find you?
They can find me at TVREV.com. That is my website. You can subscribe to our newsletters there. We have 6 newsletters a week at this point, all on different topics. So I write the Friday one. It's called The Week in Review. That was the OG. We have one that's based for a European audience called Marconi. We have one called Proximity that's about local television. And we do a lot of special reports, which you can access off of the TVREV website. And you can also hook up with me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. So I think I am the only, if I am not the only Alan Wolk there's only 1 or 2 others. So you will find me.
Thank you so much. This has been awesome. I've been looking forward to meeting you, meeting you in this case. And talking to you. So thank you so much for blessing us with all these gems of knowledge and wisdom. So thank you so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for being such a gracious host.
Yay. Hopefully we'll see you soon.
Thanks for listening to our show. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. You can follow us at The Media Machine Podcast on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. The Media Machine is hosted by Johanna Salazar. Our producers are Mia Vinciguerra and Johanna Salazar. This episode was edited by Adriana Saravia. This episode features music from Envato Elements. Thanks for listening.